Whether you're looking for a Chevy car, truck, or SUV, go see my friends at Apple Chevy in Tinley Park. With over 500 new and used vehicles in stock, they have what you're looking for, and at the lowest price possible. Go to applechevy.com. Who's on the Super Celebrity Hotline on the Rokon Show with Anna DeBlantis on 720 WGN.
We're not using that lightly at all.
No. As I said earlier when we were promoting him, one of the most influential comic voices of the 20th and 21st century.
Well, what do you mean one of the?
I mean the most influential comic voice of the 20th and 21st century.
Yes.
Mr. John Cleese is on the Super
Since the
Celebrity
universe began.
Rightly.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
This is gross flattery in an attempt to get around me and make me nice, is it?
Yeah, well, I know it won't work for long. It was just a way to introduce you, that's all. John Cleese has got a new book out. It's called So Anyway, and it takes us through the life of a comic legend, all the way from. And it's interesting because in a lot of these biographies that people write, they don't want to spend a whole lot of time on their childhood because they either they want to spend a whole lot of time on their childhood and blame everything on it, or they don't spend a lot of time on their childhood because it was idyllic and they weren't interested. And yours is an interest. What I like about this book so far is the fact that you take us through this arc about how important the comic formation in your head is from the kind of relationships you had when you were in boarding school, as we would call it here, and
that's right. It's the way my sense of humor developed, and the way it was influenced, and the way I practiced it, even in small ways when I was a kid. That's right. I like the book, you see, which some people say they write autobiographies and kind of think it's okay, it's not quite right, but I think this is right. If there are fans out there who are interested in me, then I think without any doubt they will enjoy and find the book funny. But if they're not really fans, unless they're interested in England in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I think they should stay well away. So for a sort of limited audience, I think it will be quite interesting and quite enjoyable.
Well, I think another interesting piece of this, though, too, is because as American consumers of English comedy, television comedy, we saw it mostly on PBS here. Right, and
yes,
that was
right. Absolutely right.
Way before there was 100 different channels or BBC America or anything like that. We would see something on PBS, and it was very limited what would come over here on PBS because they had a limited amount of time.
Yeah,
and so you had to whether it was obviously Monty Python, or it was Fawlty Towers, or it was the Two Ronnies, or it was any of that. The American consumer gets that may not be familiar with it, gets a way to look into what was really going on British television at the time. Because sketch comedy, as much as Saturday Night Live likes to take credit for it, I mean, it was living for 20 years before on British TV.
See, we were very lucky on Python because we really were working under the ideal conditions. I'm not talking about financially. I mean, you might be amused to know that, for example, when we did the third series, which was 13 programs, that took us about 8 months to write them all and then to do all the filming, which is quite time-consuming, and then, rehearsing and recording and all that. For those 8 months, we got paid each £4,000, about $6,000.
Wow.
So we weren't doing it for the money, but we all knew that the best comedy was being done on the BBC, not on the commercial channels, and we also knew, frankly, that the BBC at that time was probably the best broadcasting service in the world. And we were allowed to take risks. I remember somebody came over from PBS in about 1970, said he'd heard it was, Boston, WGBH, and he said he'd heard good things about it, and could he watch a couple of episodes with us? And I'm not kidding you, Ro, he went white.
Wow.
When the lights came up at the end of the second, he looked as though he'd seen a ghost, and he could hardly speak. He was so scared, thinking what would happen to his job if he'd ever put us on in Boston. So it was American television was good in many ways, particularly the factual program, but it was terribly safe. You know what I mean? And we were regarded by those people as revolutionary, and it wasn't until a lovely guy called Ron de Villiers at a PBS station, he was a fan, and he thought, to hell with this, I'm going to put it out. He put it out, and all his friends running PBS station rang it the next day and said, there's a station being burned down. Were you stoned on the way to work? He said, no, it's all fine. And then they all put it out.
Yeah.
Guess which town that was in?
Would that have been Chicago, Illinois?
It was Dallas.
Oh, Dallas.
Guess that would.
Damn it. I was
Close.
so close.
1,000 miles.
I was only 1,000 miles and 5 countries away.
You know, I mean, you wouldn't think in Dallas.
You would not.
It might be
You
San
wouldn't.
Francisco or something. But anyway, once he'd sort of got away with his life, then they put it out. And somebody once said to me on PBS, they said, you know, PBS has to thank Monty Python, because without Monty Python, PBS wouldn't continue to exist, because we were always the center point of their fundraising campaign.
That's true.
Oh, God.
And you know,
I love PBS, and I love NPR. I think those are absolute treasures, and I do hope that Congress tried to cut the budget. You know, it's one of the very few bright, intelligent things still around.
well, you know, it is
why the Republicans want to get rid of it.
It is interesting that with PBS and with and Python, because Python not only lived on PBS, but it created an entire audience in America for you for being, because I think when I started watching it as a kid in the 1970s, and I think we were probably you'd run on the BBC at least a year prior to
well, we
coming over
started
here,
in
right?
69, we finished in 73, and I don't think Ron de Villiers put it out in Dallas until 74.
Oh, so you guys were already done.
Yeah, we were done when it was discovered, but you're quite right, because it created an audience, and it was purely a fortuitous timing, but shortly after that we made the Holy Grail, and if it hadn't been for PBS putting us out all over the place, we wouldn't have had the audience that we got for Holy Grail, and that's really what got us started in America, because it's quite difficult for English shows to get started in America. Of course it is, whereas I grew up on American comedy. Did you know that?
What was it? So when you were growing up, what were your favorite American TV
Well,
shows?
I loved George Burns. I thought his monologues were absolutely wonderful. I loved Jack Benny. I thought Phil Silvers was inspired. Bilko, I think, was probably the funniest of them. And then there was Joan Davis and Lucille Ball. We used to watch a lot of it. And then what happened was at the end of the 50s, when your humor had been very good but very conventional, suddenly I started getting good old-fashioned comedy records from America with Mort Saul, Bob Newhart, Shelley Berman, Mike Nichols, and Elaine May, and this was like a huge breakthrough to me. I thought, wow, this is wonderful stuff, and that's when I got quite excited about American comedy. I always thought it was good, but I thought that's when it became exciting and people started to take some risks.
You know, John, it's interesting. We're talking to John Cleese. One of the things that in the United States that worked out well for you guys was when you released a comedy record here, and a lot of it was audio was redone versions of stuff that you'd done on the show, on the sketch comedy show.
Some of it was, and some of it was new material, but the point was it was very hard to break into American television, and what actually happened is a lovely lady in New York called Nancy Lewis just started to show it, and who loved it from the very beginning were all the musicians. All the rock musicians were just crazy about it, and so it began to get known in the sort of record business when we started, and then it started to spread. And when we made our first proper film, Holy Grail, in 74, I think it was Pink Floyd, and it was Island Records, and it was all musicians giving us the money, or investing the money for it. It was very strange, but it spread slowly.
It is interesting, though, because I think a lot of American television was in the 1950s, as was what you guys were doing in the 1960s and the 70s, was written for the ear. And then American television started to be written for the eye in the from about 1960 on, especially the advent of color and stuff like that. They were trying to use special effects. They were trying to get away with becoming much more of a visual medium.
That's interesting, but you see, the rules of comedy, the greatest rules of the greatest comedians were laid down in America in the silent movies. If you go back and watch Charlie Chaplin, who of course was British actually, but then Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, and then following on W.C. Fields, the Marx Brothers, people like that, that was the most creative, wonderful, wonderful period. And if I was going to say to someone, you want to educate yourself in I would say go back to the very early, the pre-war, pre-1939, look at those comedies, because then they started to get some of the refugees from Europe, people like Billy Wilder and Frank Capra, and they made then some of the wittiest comedies. But the early stuff was very, very visual, and as far as I'm concerned, you were laying down the rules that I was trying to absorb myself.
I grew up with a British mother, and we would watch Fawlty Towers over and over and over and over again. My mom would laugh hilariously at each one. I think I've honestly memorized the whole thing. And it's so true. It was part of my childhood. I just loved it. It was the British humor that translated so well. And I know people asked, were you going to do more of those? I know people have asked, are you going to do more movies? You said, I'm fed up with movies.
They've all got their advantages and their disadvantages, but right at the moment I'm doing a tour with Eric Idle, and what's nice is that when you're in front of a live audience, it's so real, you know. But we had very good conditions, because the BBC was paying us next to nothing and putting us out very, very late on a Sunday night. So the wonderful thing was they didn't supervise us. They were spending so little money on us. They said, let them get on with it. So we were able in Python to take enormous risks and do terribly naughty things that we'd never have got away with if we'd been going out at 8 o'clock. We used to sort of rub our hands together and jump up and down like naughty schoolboys and say, let's be naughty today. And one of the things I do in the show with Eric is a sketch that Graham Chapman and I wrote set in an Undertaker, and it's absolutely disgraceful.
Disgraceful. I love that.
John, hold on one second. John Cleese is going to be in Chicago November 5th and 6th, and I'll explain exactly how you can go see him. And I'm taking part of it. I have no idea how I was asked to take part in this, John.
I can tell you, because I have a lovely PA. He's not with me anymore, because after a few years, his wife had decided she didn't like Santa Barbara so much, so she came back to Illinois, and of course he came with her. But for about 6 years, this guy, his name is Howard Johnson. He's really called Kim Johnson, but he's always been called Howard. He was my assistant, and prior to that, he's known all the Pythons for years. He came to Tunisia when he was more or less a student and turned up on the set when we were shooting Live for Brian. And we saw this tall, gawky young guy coming towards us with a big grin, and we said, well, who are you? And he said, my name's Howard. I hitchhiked here to Tunisia.
Oh, my God.
North Africa. I hitchhiked here. Can I be in the movie? And we said, yeah, have some lunch. And altogether, he played 17 different roles in the movie, Roman centurions and
awesome.
Jewish stallholders and all that kind of thing. So he's been around, and he said, you got to get this guy Rowe. And I said, all right. And he apparently arranged it. So I'm looking forward to it, because the most thing is when you're interviewing me, ask me things you're really interested in, and particularly ask me rude questions.
Oh, I will. Don't worry. Don't worry. And we'll get to be naughty on stage in a way that the advertisers can't get in the way of. And speaking of that, hold on one second for me, and we'll come right back. We'll explain how you can do this. John Cleese is with us, the great John Cleese. As I said, the most important comic influence of the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. Prior to 1400,
who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
We'll have to figure that out.
I am so jealous by you being there at the Cleese thing. I got to be there.
All right, John Cleese is on the Super Celebrity Hotline, and John Cleese is going to be in Chicago in early November 5th and 6th at the Amphitheater Theater, which is on the north side of Chicago. It's sort of in the Lakeview area.
Great area.
And
he's going to be interviewed by somebody called Rowe. Anna, do you know this guy?
I do, and I'm so jealous.
What do you think of him? Somebody says he's rather boring.
No. Boring you will not find. You will not find boring. No.
Oh, God. No. No.
Is he difficult?
No, he's not difficult either. He has some angst-filled moments, and, it's a little emotional sometimes, and his voice gets really high, so you got to worry and watch out for that.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a bit of a scenery eater, too, so look out for that as well.
All right. What kind of sense of humor do you have?
Yours, essentially.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's quite
you get on well, that's good.
Yeah.
We'll have a very silly time, because we never know what's going to happen. I was on stage a couple of nights ago, and the phone, somebody ran up the aisle saying, will you take a call from your wife? And holding your phone out. And I said, and I recognized him. He's a friend of my wife's. He's in London. So I took the phone and I said, oh, hello. I call her Fish because she swims so beautifully. And I said, hello, Fish. And she said, hello. And I said, the only thing is I'm on stage at the moment in front of 2,000 people. And she said, I know.
She called you anyways.
You know why I love her.
Right.
So we will. Tickets go on sale for this event, and this I think in the fall theater season here in Chicago. This is the don't miss event of the fall theater season. Tomorrow at noon. Tickets go on sale at anthemtheater.org, or you can call the Anthem Theater box office 773-935-6875. We'll give you all that information again tomorrow. But
Bro, do you know
Athenaeum Theater. I said Anthem. It's Athenaeum Theater. What am I thinking? Yes, I'm sorry. Do I know what?
Do you know the theater?
I do. It's beautiful.
Is it old?
Yeah. Well, it is, but it's been redone. So.
Yeah, but I like the old ones. The structure of the old ones much better, because when they started building theaters after they invented the microphone, they made them too big, you see. So the old ones are better. Anyway, what can I tell you?
Well, you can tell us. We'll see you then, because we're going to run here for news. But I appreciate you being with us and taking the time. And the book, by the way, says So Anyway, ... And
out in paperback. That's the point, right? Because it came out a year ago and has actually done very well in America, which is lovely. But it's just my humor, and as I say, if you like my stuff, you'll love it, and if you don't like it, stay away.
Stay away. I think there's another sod off or something. Isn't that what people say there?
In
I
your
don't know.
country, they do say that.
Yes, back in your country where they speak some other
Same
language.
English, but somehow very different.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, John, we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for being with us,
Thank you,
man.
John.
Appreciate it.
I look forward to that. Thank you, both of you.
All right. There he goes, John Cleese. The book is So Anyway. It's where all fine books are sold, the internet.